The sound of bricks hitting concrete echoed through the dawn air as Marcus sealed off his own driveway, trapping Karen's BMW inside like a tomb. She'd pushed him too far with her entitled parking games, but as he threw his suitcase in the back of his truck and drove away, he had no idea that Karen wasn't just some random neighbor. She was the wife of the city's most corrupt police captain, and his simple act of revenge was about to unleash a war that would destroy everything he'd worked for. Sometimes the price of justice is everything you hold dear. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pulled into his driveway after another grueling 12-hour shift at the auto repair shop. The familiar sight that greeted him made his jaw clench. A gleaming white BMW X5 sat squarely in the center of his driveway, blocking access to his garage. Again. This was the fourth time this week. He sat in his pickup truck for a moment, engine idling, staring at the luxury SUV that had become the bane of his existence. Through his windshield, he could see the vanity plate, Karen 1. The audacity was breathtaking. Marcus climbed out of his truck, his work boots crunching on the gravel. His modest two-story house sat on Maple Street in what used to be a quiet, working-class neighborhood before the gentrification started creeping in. The house had been his parents' before they passed, and he'd been making the mortgage payments religiously for 3 years since inheriting it. The BMW's owner emerged from the house next door, a towering McMansion that had been built 2 years. Ego, dwarfing the original homes on the street. Karen Brewster was exactly what Central Casting would order for an entitled suburbanite. Bleached blonde hair in a perfect bob, designer athleisure wear, and an expression of perpetual irritation, as if the world existed solely to inconvenience her. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice steady but firm. "That's my driveway." Karen looked over with the kind of dismissive glance usually reserved for something unpleasant on the bottom of a shoe. "I know." "Then you know you need to move your car." She paused at her front door, key in hand. "Listen, Miguel, it's Marcus. Whatever. I'm having work done on my driveway. The contractors need space for their equipment. I'll move it when they're finished." "When will that be?" Karen shrugged. "A few days, maybe a week." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. "You can't just park in my driveway for a week without asking. It's not hurting anything. You can park on the street." "I shouldn't have to park on the street. It's my property." Karen's expression shifted to that particular brand of condescension that affluent people perfected. "Look, I understand you're upset, but this is temporary. Surely you can be neighborly about this." Neighborly would have been asking first. Neighborly would have been offering to pay for the inconvenience. This is theft of services. "Theft?" Karen laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. "It's just a driveway. Don't be so dramatic." She disappeared into her house, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Marcus stood alone in his own driveway, blocked out of his own garage by someone who treated his property like her personal parking lot. He pulled out his phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. "Woodbridge Police, this is Officer Martinez. Hi, I need to report a vehicle illegally parked in my driveway. The owner refuses to move it. Is this a neighbor dispute?" "I guess you could call it that. Someone parked in my driveway without permission and won't move when asked." "Have you tried talking to them directly?" Marcus glanced at Karen's house. "Yes. She told me to park on the street." "Look, sir, unless there's a safety issue or the vehicle is abandoned, this sounds like a civil matter. You might want to try talking to them again or consider calling a tow company." "A tow company?" "If it's your private property, you have the right to have unauthorized vehicles removed. Just make sure you follow local ordinances." Marcus hung up, frustrated but not surprised. The police weren't going to help with what they saw as a petty neighbor squabble. He called Murphy's Towing, a company he knew from his work at the shop. "Murphy's, this is Tony." "Tony, it's Marcus Chen from Rodriguez. Auto repair. I need a car towed from my driveway." "No problem, Marcus. What's the situation?" "Neighbor parked in my driveway without permission. Refuses to move it. Address? Marcus gave him the information. How soon can you get here? 30 minutes. And, Marcus, make sure you got the right to tow before I hook it up. I don't want any legal trouble. It's my property. I asked her to move it. She refused. Good enough for me. Marcus waited, pacing his small front yard. The autumn air carried the smell of burning leaves and the distant sound of leaf blowers. Normal suburban sounds for normal suburban problems, except nothing about this felt normal anymore. Karen had moved in 2 years ago with her police captain husband, Daniel Brewster. Marcus had tried to be welcoming at first, even bringing over a plate of his mother's famous chocolate chip cookies as a housewarming gift. Karen had taken them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and never returned the plate. The problems started small. Their landscapers would park across Marcus's driveway while working, blocking him in or out. When he'd politely ask them to move, they'd ignore him until Karen emerged to tell them it was fine to stay. Then came the dinner parties, where guests would park in front of his house, making it difficult for him to park. When he'd asked Karen to let her guests know, she'd laughed and said it was a public street, but this, taking over his driveway, was a line too far. The tow truck arrived exactly 30 minutes later, a flatbed with Murphy's Towing painted. On the side, Tony climbed out, a stocky man in coveralls with grease-stained hands and a no-nonsense expression. That the one? Tony nodded toward the BMW. That's it. Tony walked around the vehicle, checking for damage and taking photos. Nice ride. Probably 40 grand, maybe 50 with the options. Can you get it out without damaging my driveway? Should be fine. Concrete's in good shape. Tony began positioning his truck. Where you want me to take it? Wherever you take. Unauthorized vehicles. Storage lot on Industrial Avenue. Owner's got 72 hours to claim it before I can sell it to cover fees. The sound of the tow truck's hydraulics filled the air as the flatbed tilted. Tony worked efficiently, securing the BMW with practiced movements. Marcus watched from his front steps, a mix of satisfaction and nervousness churning in his stomach. Karen's front door flew open just as Tony was raising the flatbed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed, running toward the truck in her designer slides. "Having your car towed from my property," Marcus replied calmly. "You can't do that." "Actually, he can," Tony said without looking up from his work. "Private property, unauthorized vehicle. As long as he asked you to move it first, it's perfectly legal." Karen's face flushed red. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." "Go." "Ahead," Marcus said. "I already did. They told me to call a tow company." The BMW was now fully loaded on the flatbed. Tony climbed back into his cab and rolled down the window. "Storage lots at 1247 Industrial Avenue. Towing fees $150. Storage is $25 a day. Cash or card." The truck pulled away, taking Karen's BMW with it. She stood in the street, her perfect, bob disheveled, staring after it like she couldn't believe what had just happened. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I've taken back my driveway. You've made an enemy." Karen pulled out her phone. "Danny, it's me. You need to come home." "Now. Some asshole just had my car towed." Marcus heard her husband's voice through the phone, though he couldn't make out the words. "I don't care what you're doing," Karen continued. "This is important. Our neighbor just declared war." She hung up and fixed Marcus with a look of pure hatred. "Captain Daniel Brewster is my husband. He's going to make your life very, very difficult. For legally towing a car from my own driveway? For messing with the wrong family." Karen stormed back toward her house, then stopped and turned around. "You know what? I was going to move the car tomorrow anyway. But now I'm going to make sure you regret this for the rest of your pathetic little life." Marcus watched her go, a cold dread settling in his chest. He'd heard the name Daniel Brewster before. Everyone in Woodbridge had. The man had been police, captain for 8 years, known for his tough-on-crime stance and his department's aggressive enforcement policies. Marcus had also heard whispers about corruption, about cases that disappeared and evidence that went missing, but those were just rumors. Now he was about to find out if the rumors were true. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of his doorbell ringing insistently. He glanced at his alarm clock, 6:30 a.m. He pulled on a robe and stumbled downstairs, opening the door to find two police officers on his front porch. Marcus Chen? Yes. I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Kim. We need to talk to you about your vehicle. My vehicle? Your pickup truck. We have reports it was involved in a hit and run last night. Marcus stared at them. That's impossible. My truck was parked in my driveway all night. Can you prove that? I was here all night. I never left after I got home from work. Anyone who can verify that? Marcus thought about it. He lived alone. Had no girlfriend, no roommates. No, but we're going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. But if you refuse to cooperate, that could change. Marcus looked past the Part 2, the deeper game. Marcus drove through the night, his hands gripping the steering wheel as suburban streetlights flickered past like dying stars. The radio played soft jazz that did nothing to calm the storm brewing in his chest. Every mile closer to Woodbridge felt like driving toward his own execution. He'd made a critical error in judgment. What he'd thought was a simple neighbor dispute had revealed itself to be something far more sinister, a glimpse into a corruption so deep it reached into every corner of the city's power structure. Captain Daniel Brewster hadn't just threatened him. He'd demonstrated the reach of his influence with surgical precision. The frozen bank accounts, the mysterious lien on his property, the coordinated legal assault from multiple directions. This wasn't the work of an angry husband defending his wife's honor. This was the systematic dismantling of a life, orchestrated by someone who'd done it before. Marcus pulled into a 24-hour diner in Millfield, 20 miles from Woodbridge, and ordered coffee he didn't want. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. A handful of truck drivers and night shift workers sat scattered across cracked vinyl booths, each lost in their own late-night struggles. He pulled out his phone and called his cousin Jake in Denver. Marcus? Jesus, what time is it? Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, man. You sound terrible. What's wrong? If someone wanted to destroy a person's life, completely destroy them, how would they do it? Jake was quiet for a long moment. What kind of trouble are you in? The kind that involves corrupt cops and frozen bank accounts. Shit, Marcus, are you serious? Dead serious. Another pause. Jake worked as an investigative journalist for the Denver Post, and Marcus had always admired his cousin's ability to see through surface lies to the truth beneath. Okay, Jake said finally. If I wanted to destroy someone, I'd attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Financial pressure, freeze accounts, file false liens, create tax problems, legal pressure, multiple lawsuits, criminal charges, regulatory violations, social pressure, destroy their reputation, turn friends against them. And I'd make sure they couldn't fight back by controlling information and limiting their resources. Marcus felt his stomach clench. That's exactly what's happening. Who are you dealing with? Police Captain Daniel Brewster. His wife was parking. In my driveway, I had her car towed, and now he's coming after me with everything he's got. Brewster? Jake's voice sharpened. Marcus? That name rings a bell. Give me 10 minutes. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his coffee, watching the surface ripple as trucks rumbled past outside. The diner felt like a liminal space, caught between the life he'd known and the hell he was driving back into. His phone rang. Marcus, you need to listen to me very carefully, Jake said without preamble. Daniel Brewster isn't just a corrupt cop. He's been on the FBI's radar for 3 years as part of a racketeering investigation. There's a whole network, police, judges, prosecutors, city council members. They call it the Woodbridge Syndicate. The FBI knows about this? They know, but they can't prove it. Every time they get close, witnesses disappear or recant, evidence gets lost, cases get dropped. These people don't just bend the rules, Marcus. They own the game. Marcus closed his eyes. What have I gotten myself into? You've kicked a hornet's nest. But here's the thing. The feds have been looking for someone on the inside. Someone with a legitimate grievance who can help them build a case. You're saying I should become an informant? I'm saying you might be the key they've been looking for. But Marcus, if you go down this road, there's no turning back. These people don't forgive, and they don't forget. Marcus thought about his brick wall, his small act of defiance that had started this whole mess. I'm already past the point of no return. Then let me make some calls. But you need to be smart about this. Don't go home tonight. Find a hotel, pay cash, use a fake name. And whatever you do, don't talk to anyone from Woodbridge until we figure out your next move. After hanging up with Jake, Marcus drove to a motel outside of town and paid for a room with cash from his dwindling supply. The room smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was anonymous and safe. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Karen's satisfied smile, heard Captain Brewster's threatening voice, but something else kept nagging at him, a detail that didn't quite fit. The hit and run. Marcus pulled out his phone and searched local news for accidents the night his truck was allegedly involved. He found it quickly. Late-night hit-and-run leaves Woodbridge resident's car totaled. The victim was Margaret Torres, an 82-year-old widow who lived alone on Elm Street. Her 15-year-old Honda Civic had been parked in front of her house when it was struck by a vehicle that fled the scene. The damage photos showed the car was completely destroyed, not just dented, but crushed, as if hit by something much larger than a pickup truck. Marcus studied the photos more carefully. The damage pattern was wrong for a pickup truck collision. The impact point was too high, too wide. This looked like it had been hit by something with a much higher profile, an SUV or maybe a large van. He called the number listed for Margaret Torres, knowing it was late but hoping she might still be awake. Hello? The voice was elderly but sharp. Mrs. Torres? My name is Marcus Chen. I'm calling about your car accident. Are you with the insurance company? No, ma'am. I'm the person the police think hit your car. Silence. Mrs. Torres? I didn't hit your car, but I think I know who did. You better come over here, young man. We need to talk. Margaret Torres lived in a neat bungalow with a garden that had been lovingly maintained for decades. She met Marcus at the door in a bathrobe, her silver hair in curlers, her eyes bright with intelligence and suspicion. You're the one they're saying hit my car? Yes, ma'am, but I didn't do it. I know you didn't do it. Marcus blinked. You do? Come in, sit down. I'll make coffee. The living room was filled with photographs spanning decades, children and grandchildren, family gatherings, a life well lived. Margaret returned with 2 cups of coffee and settled into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose bones remembered better days. How do you know I didn't hit your car? Because I saw what hit my car. Margaret's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. I was up late reading when I heard the crash. Looked out my window and saw a white SUV backing away from my Honda, then driving off. A white SUV? BMW, I think. One of those big ones with the fancy wheels. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Did you tell the police this? Of course I did. Officer Rodriguez came by the next morning, took my statement. I told him exactly what I saw. And nothing. He wrote it down, said they'd investigate, and I never heard another word. Until today when Officer Kim called to tell me they'd found the truck that hit my car and were making an arrest. They didn't find the truck, Mrs. Torres. They're trying to frame me. Margaret studied his face with the keen eye of someone who'd raised 6 children and buried 1 husband. Why would they do that? Marcus told her everything. The parking dispute, Karen's car being towed, the escalating retaliation. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. So this Karen woman hits my car while fleeing from her own driveway, then tells the police she saw you leaving yours around the same time? That's what I think happened. And her husband is Captain Brewster? Yes. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. When she looked up, her expression had hardened. 23 years ago, my son Danny was arrested for drug possession. Said the police planted evidence in his car during a traffic stop. Nobody believed him. He was a good boy, never touched drugs in his life, but his word against a police officers? She shook her head. He spent 2 years in prison, came out a broken man, died of a heart attack at 31. I'm sorry. The arresting officer was Daniel Brewster. He was just a detective then, but even then, people whispered about him, about evidence that appeared and disappeared, about witnesses who changed their stories. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. Mrs. Torres, would you be willing to tell the FBI what you saw? The FBI. There's an investigation. This goes deeper than just my situation. Margaret Torres sat back in her chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to show through her lace curtains. You know what the hardest part of getting old is? She asked. What? Watching the world get more corrupt and feeling like you can't do anything about it. Watching good people get crushed by bad people with power. She looked directly at him. I'll talk to whoever you want me to talk to. As the sun rose over Woodbridge, Marcus sat in Margaret Torres's kitchen while she made breakfast and called her grandson, a lawyer in the state capitol. They had a witness, proof of police misconduct, and the beginning of a real case. But as Marcus's phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers, he realized that Captain Brewster was just getting started. The first text message came at 7 a.m. Check your email. Marcus opened his laptop to find his inbox flooded with messages. Job applications he'd never filled out for positions at strip clubs and adult bookstores, subscription confirmations for pornographic websites, notifications that his personal information had been posted on Craigslist in the casual encounters. Agent Sarah Chen looked nothing like what Marcus had expected from an FBI investigator. She was petite, probably in her early 30s, with shoulder-length black hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her an academic appearance. They met at a coffee shop in Millfield, 15 miles from Woodbridge, neutral territory that felt safer than anywhere within Captain Brewster's sphere of influence. Mr. Chen, I've reviewed your situation, she said, sliding a manila folder across the small table. What you're describing fits a pattern we've been tracking for almost 4 years. Marcus opened the folder to find photographs, documents, and what looked like an organizational chart. At the center was a photo of Captain Daniel Brewster with lines connecting him to dozens of other faces, judges, prosecutors, city council members, business owners. This is bigger than I thought. Much bigger. We estimate the Woodbridge network has generated over $50 million in illegal revenue through bid rigging, evidence tampering, protection rackets, and real estate manipulation. Real estate manipulation? Agent Chen pointed to a section of the chart. They identify properties they want, then use code violations, tax liens, and legal harassment to force owners to sell below market value. Your house fits the profile perfectly. Older property in a gentrifying neighborhood, single owner with limited resources to fight back. Marcus studied the photos of other victims. How many people have they done this to? We've documented 47 cases in the past 3 years. Most people just take whatever settlement they're offered and leave town. You're the first one who fought back hard enough to get their attention. Lucky me. Actually, yes. Your willingness to fight makes you valuable to us. But Marcus, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. These people have killed before. The words hit him like a physical blow. Killed? Agent Chen pulled out another file. Robert Martinez, city inspector who was going to testify about construction kickbacks. Car accident on a clear day. No witnesses. Jennifer Walsh, accountant who discovered irregularities in city contracts. House fire, electrical fault. Thomas Nguyen, reporter investigating police corruption. Suicide, apparently. Marcus stared at the photos of three ordinary-looking people who'd had the courage to speak up. How do you know they were murdered? We can't prove it in court, but the pattern is clear. Anyone who poses a real threat to their operation either dies or disappears. Then why are you asking me to help? Because you're already on their list. The question is whether you want to die for nothing or die for something that might bring them down. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Die for something? That's encouraging. I won't lie to you, this is dangerous. But we've been building a case for years, and you might be the key we need. Your situation gives us probable cause for surveillance, wiretaps, financial investigations. What do you need from me? Agent Chen leaned forward. We need you to go back to Woodbridge. Act like you're beaten, like you're ready to cooperate with Captain Brewster. Let him think he's won. And then? Then you document everything. Record. Conversations when you can. Note who you meet with, what they say. Help us map their organization from the inside. Marcus thought about Margaret Torres in her hospital bed, about the spray paint on his brick wall, about his frozen bank accounts and destroyed reputation. How long? Could be weeks, could be months. These operations move slowly. They'll want to be sure you're not a threat before they let you see how things really work. And if they figure out I'm working with you? Agent Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then you joined the list of people who had unfortunate accidents. Marcus left the meeting with a small recording device disguised as a cell phone charger and instructions to check in with Agent Chen every 48 hours using a coded email account. He also left with the knowledge that his life expectancy had probably dropped to somewhere between days and months. But as he drove back toward Woodbridge, he felt something he hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, he wasn't fighting alone. The first test came sooner than expected. Marcus's real phone rang as he pulled into his driveway, the driveway he could no longer access thanks to his own brick wall. Mr. Chen? This is Captain Brewster. I think it's time we had that conversation. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at Rosario's restaurant on Main Street in an hour. Come alone. The line went dead. Rosario's was a family-owned Italian place that had been serving Woodbridge for 3 generations. Marcus had eaten there dozens of times with his parents when he was younger. The irony wasn't lost on him that his potential destruction might be negotiated over the same red sauce and breadsticks he'd enjoyed as a child. Captain Brewster was already seated in a corner booth when Marcus arrived. Up close, the man was exactly what central casting would order for a corrupt cop. Thick-set, graying hair, expensive suit that didn't quite hide the shoulder holster, and cold blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Sit down, Marcus. Mind if I call you Marcus? Marcus slid into the booth across from him. What do you want? What I want is to resolve this situation like civilized men. You've had some time to think about your position, and I'm hoping you've gained some perspective. A waitress appeared, and Brewster ordered wine for both of them without asking Marcus's preference. The casual assertion of control was noted. Here's how I see it, Brewster continued once they were alone again. You're a working man who got caught up in something bigger than you understood. My wife can be difficult. I get that, but your response was disproportionate. Disproportionate? A brick wall, Marcus? Really? It's my property. Property is a fluid concept. Ownership depends on a lot of factors: taxes, liens, compliance with city codes. A man can lose his property very quickly if he's not careful. The threat was delivered with a smile, but Marcus heard it clearly. He activated the recording app on his phone under the table. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we forget this whole thing happened. You tear down the wall, apologize to Karen, and we all move on with our lives. And in return? In return, you get to keep living your life. The criminal charges disappear. The lien on your property gets resolved. Your bank accounts get unfrozen. Life goes back to normal. Marcus pretended to consider this. What about the money I spent on the towing, the brick wall, the time I've lost? Brewster's smile widened. Consider it a learning experience, the cost of education in how the world really works. And if I refuse? The smile vanished. Then you'll discover that your problems so far have been minor inconveniences compared to what happens to people who don't know when to quit. Marcus looked. Around the restaurant, at the families eating dinner, the couples on dates, the normal life happening all around them while they negotiated his survival. I need some time to think about it. Of course. But Marcus? Brewster leaned forward. Don't. Take too long. My patience isn't infinite. And Karen is getting angrier by the day. Yesterday, she asked me why you were still breathing. The casual mention of murder sent ice through Marcus's veins. She said that? Karen has very strong opinions about people who disrespect her. Sometimes I wonder if I married a woman or a force of nature. Brewster chuckled as if discussing the weather. 24 hours, Marcus. Then we do this the hard way. After Brewster left, Marcus sat in his car in the restaurant parking lot, hands shaking as he reviewed the recording. It wasn't enough for a conviction, but it was a start. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Marcus opened his email to find security camera footage from the night of the hit and run. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., and the grainy video clearly showed a white BMW SUV backing away from Margaret Torres's destroyed Honda Civic before speeding away. The license plate was clearly visible. Karen 1. A second email contained more footage from a different camera showing the same BMW running a red light 3 blocks from the accident scene. The timestamp matched perfectly. A third email was from Margaret Torres. Thought you might find these interesting. My neighbor has security cameras. Amazing what you can see when you know where to look. Marcus stared at the footage in amazement. Margaret Torres had somehow obtained video evidence that completely exonerated him and implicated Karen Brewster in a felony hit and run. But as he forwarded the files to Agent Chen, Marcus realized something troubling. The timestamps on the videos showed the accident happening at 11:47 p.m. But according to the police report, the accident was discovered at 12:15 a.m. Karen hadn't just committed hit and run. She'd left the scene and gone home, leaving an elderly woman's car destroyed in front of her house for nearly half an hour before someone called it in, which meant she'd had time to shower, change clothes, and rehearse her story about seeing Marcus leave his driveway at midnight. This wasn't a panicked accident. This was calculated, premeditated fraud. Marcus's phone rang. Agent Chen. I got your email. This is huge, Marcus. We've got them dead to rights on felony hit and run, insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and witness tampering. So we can arrest them? Not yet. If we move now, they'll lawyer up and we'll lose the chance to get the bigger fish. This is our leverage to get them to expose the whole network. What do you mean? I mean you're going to blackmail a police captain. The plan Agent Chen outlined. Marcus stood in Margaret Torres's funeral parlor, surrounded by flowers that smelled too sweet, and mourners who whispered too quietly. The casket was closed. Family's request, the funeral director had explained, with the practiced sympathy of someone who'd seen too much death to be truly moved by it anymore. But Marcus knew the real reason for the closed casket. He'd seen the medical examiner's preliminary report that Agent Chen had quietly shared with him. Massive internal hemorrhaging, consistent with blunt force trauma to the abdomen. The kind of injuries that didn't come from falling downstairs. She was a good woman, said Father Martinez, the elderly priest who'd known Margaret for 40 years. Always helping others, always fighting for what was right. Even at 82, she had more courage than people half her age. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Guilt sat in his chest like a tumor, growing larger with each condolence offered by Margaret's family and friends. These people didn't know that their beloved mother, grandmother, and friend had died because she'd tried to help a stranger seek justice. They didn't know that her blood was on his hands. After the service, Marcus walked through the cemetery alone, past rows of weathered headstones marking the lives of people who'd died natural deaths surrounded by family. Margaret Torres would be buried in a plot next to her husband of 53 years, but she died alone in a hospital because she'd been brave enough to tell the truth. His phone buzzed. "Agent Chen, I'm sorry about Mrs. Torres. I know she meant something to you. She died because of me. She died because she stood up to murderers. That was her choice." "Her choice?" Marcus's voice rose loud enough to disturb a groundskeeper raking leaves nearby. "She was 82 years old. She should have been playing with her grandchildren, not getting beaten to death by corrupt cops." "Marcus, I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it." Marcus stared at the fresh gravesite where Margaret would be laid to rest in 2 hours. "What's our next move?" "Actually, I was calling to tell you that there might not be a next move. The video evidence you obtained, there are some problems." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "What kind of problems?" "Chain of custody issues. The defense will argue that the footage was obtained illegally, that it's been tampered with, that it can't be authenticated. Without Mrs. Torres to testify about how she got it, we can't prove its legitimacy in court." "So they get away with it?" "Not necessarily. We still have the recording of your conversation with Captain Brewster. But that's not enough for murder charges. And without the video evidence, it's not enough for the hit and run either." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling 3 days of hope crumble like sand. "So Margaret died for nothing." "Margaret died because evil people killed her. But her death doesn't have to be meaningless. There's still a way to bring them down." "How?" "We go deeper. We get you inside their organization. Let them think they've won, let them trust you, and then we document everything from the inside. They'll never trust me after what just happened." "They will if you play it right. You threatened them. They eliminated the threat, and now you're broken. From their perspective, you're exactly where they want you. Scared, isolated, and completely under their control." Marcus thought about this. "You want me to pretend Margaret's death broke me? I want you to use their victory against them. Let them think they've won so completely that they don't see you as a threat anymore. And then? Then you become the threat they never saw coming." That evening, Marcus sat in his living room staring at the brick wall he'd built across his driveway. The red spray paint spelling "coward" had faded in the rain, but it was still visible. Maybe that was appropriate. Maybe he was a coward who'd gotten an innocent woman killed. His phone rang. "Captain Brewster." "Marcus, I heard about your friend Mrs. Torres. Tragic accident." The casual cruelty in Brewster's voice made Marcus's jaw clench. "It wasn't an accident. Old people have complications. It's sad, but it happens. She was murdered. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "You know what happened." "I know that an elderly woman fell down her stairs and later died from her injuries. Anything beyond that is just your imagination running wild." The message was clear. They could kill anyone, any time, and there was nothing Marcus could do about it. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "I want to discuss the terms of our agreement. Obviously, recent events have changed the situation." "What do you mean?" "I mean your leverage died with Mrs. Torres. The video evidence you had is worthless without her testimony. So we're back to my original offer." Marcus felt the trap closing around him. "Which is?" "Tear down the wall. Apologize to my wife, and we'll let you keep breathing. And if I refuse?" "Then you'll join your friend, Mrs. Torres. Though I doubt anyone will come to your funeral." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the darkness of his living room, listening to the silence that surrounded him. No girlfriend to comfort him. No close friends to confide in. No family left to mourn him when he was gone. He was exactly what Brewster had said, alone. But as he sat there, something shifted inside him. The guilt and fear that had been eating at him since Margaret's death crystallized into something harder, colder, rage. pure, focused rage at a system that allowed people like the Brewsters to destroy lives with impunity. Rage at a world where telling the truth was a death sentence and corruption was rewarded. Rage at his own helplessness in the face of overwhelming evil. Marcus stood up and walked to his garage, where his father's old toolbox sat covered in dust. Inside, he found what he was looking for, a sledgehammer that had helped build the addition to their house 20 years ago. He carried it outside to his driveway and stood facing the brick wall he'd built in anger and desperation just a week ago. The wall that had started this whole nightmare. The wall that represented his futile attempt to maintain some control over his own life. Marcus raised the sledgehammer and brought it down on the center of the wall with all the strength he could muster. Bricks exploded, mortar cracked, and dust filled the air. But he didn't stop. He swung again and again, each blow driven by fury and grief and a desperate need to destroy something, anything that he had the power to destroy. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold October air. His arms ached and his hands blistered, but he kept swinging. Neighbors came out to watch. Someone called the police. Marcus didn't care. When Officer Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, Marcus had reduced his brick wall to rubble. The driveway was clear. The symbol of his defiance was gone. "Marcus, you okay, man?" Marcus dropped the sledgehammer and sat down heavily on his front steps. "I'm fine." Rodriguez looked at the destroyed wall, the scattered bricks, the man sitting amid the wreckage of his own creation. "This doesn't look fine. I'm following orders. Captain Brewster wanted the wall down. The wall is down." "The captain told you to destroy your own property?" Marcus looked up at Rodriguez, a decent cop who'd always been fair with him, who'd probably joined the force to help people and had no idea how deep the corruption ran in his own department. "Officer Rodriguez, if you knew that your boss was a criminal, would you report it?" Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "That's a pretty serious accusation." "It's a serious question. If I had evidence of criminal activity, yes, I'd report it through proper channels. And if the proper channels were part of the criminal activity?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. "Then I'd find other channels." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Rodriguez the video of Karen's BMW hitting Margaret Torres's car. "This is your captain's wife committing felony. Hit and run. The same accident you investigated, the same accident your department is trying to pin on me." Rodriguez watched the video twice, his expression growing darker. When it ended, he handed the phone back to Marcus. "Where did you get this?" "Margaret Torres had security camera footage. She's dead now. Died yesterday from complications after being beaten up by two men who warned her not to talk to anyone." Jesus Christ. Rodriguez sat down next to Marcus on the steps. This is huge. This is just the beginning. Your captain is part of a corruption network that's been destroying lives for years. Margaret Torres died because she tried to help expose them." Rodriguez stared at the rubble of Marcus's wall. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to help me bring them down." "How?" Marcus pulled out a business card Agent Chen had given him. "Call this number. Talk to Agent Chen with the FBI. Tell her everything you know about irregularities in your department." Rodriguez took the card, studied it. "If I do this, my career is over. If you don't do this, more innocent people will die." They sat in silence for several minutes, two men contemplating the cost of doing the right thing. Around them, the scattered bricks of Marcus's wall looked like the remains of a small war. "There have been things," Rodriguez said finally. "Cases that got dropped for no reason. Evidence that disappeared. Witnesses who changed their stories. I always thought it was just the way things worked. It's the way things work when the system is corrupt from top to bottom." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I'll call your FBI agent. But Marcus, if we're doing this, we have to be smart about it. These people have killed before." "I know. They killed Margaret Torres to send me a message." "What message?" Marcus looked at the